can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Amanda Dorenberg of COMMB.ca, and she has so many irons on the fire. So it's not just COMMB, but she does work with Art Help. She does work with Billboard.ca and many more, which we'll go into the whole timeline. And, you know, she's been up since, 4:30 or earlier, doing calls all over the world, actually. So, Amanda, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And, I know in the, with COMMB and the Canadian, COMMB stands for Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Bureau. You deal with a lot of different companies and some agencies in the space and some billboard company, all over the map. This I'm going to put it as part of my top agency series because I know you deal with a lot of agencies through COMMB. And some good ones were Jason Swank. He actually built up his agency to over 8 figures and sold it. And then, so he talks about that journey and then his new journey of buying up agencies. And he talks about valuation and the landscape and everything in that realm. Also, Todd Taskey of similar sentiment actually has the Second Bite podcast, where he actually matches agencies and private equity and helps sell agencies, and also talks about the valuation, the landscape, and Second Bite, because sometimes the private equity companies that buy the agencies sometimes make more on the second bite than the first when those private equity sells the whole group again. So that was an interesting conversation as well. Many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. Amanda, we call ourselves the magic elves that run around in the background and make it look easy for the host and the company to create great content and amazing relationships. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com to learn more. I'm excited to introduce Amanda Dorenberg. She's president of the Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Bureau, COMMB.ca. And Amanda's a technology and marketing executive she's been featured in Forbes Tech, Wired Magazine, among other national, international media outlets. She's also an active member of Forbes Tech Council, Entrepreneur Fast Company. And as president of COMMB, she's responsible for driving innovative change, using some of the new emerging technologies across the out-of-home industry. And she's responsible for the collective marketing and measurement efforts for the OOH industry across Canada. And she's going to talk about some of the cool things that are on the horizon. Other people are taking notice and wanting to implement it themselves as well. And she is an amazing, I'll even venture to say, Amanda, crazy journey.
Very crazy journey.
And thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's going to be a good month.
Some of these stories and when you look at someone, you never know all the struggles they've gone through. And that's what I love about these interviews. Like, people seemingly on the top of their game, top of an industry, but hearing the crazy stories. And we're going to talk about some of those because it's one of the craziest I've seen out there. And I won't divulge it yet, but
I'm going to get there.
Yeah, but start off with COMMB and what the organization does.
Absolutely. So COMMB, as you mentioned, is the Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Bureau. We are a national not-for-profit association that is membership-based. And we sit in between as sort of a third-party, non-biased entity to provide both marketing and measurement services to the out-of-home advertising community. When I say measurement services, I really mean how do you attribute, an impression in the offline space in out of home. So we have data science that understands the amount of consumers that pass by a specific out of home asset. And for clarity's sake, out of home is basically anything that is outside of your home. So it could be the billboards on a roadside. It could be the transit shelters that you see as you're sort of moving throughout your journey. It could be what we call place-based. So you're indoors, you're dining out at a restaurant and you see an advertisement within that venue. You're at a hair salon, you see an advertisement within that venue. That's all classified as out of home. And in both cases, whether it be outdoor or place-based, we provide the measurement and attribution to quantify to the buyers how many eyes essentially are being captured for that particular advertising campaign. On the marketing side, we provide advocacy for the benefits of out of home and why marketers should take advantage of this very powerful medium. So kind of a combination of both marketing and measurement in a nutshell.
And if you're listening to the audio, there's a video piece and we're looking here at COMMB, COMMB.ca, and you can see, and you can poke around and learn more. But from a membership perspective, who are ideal members? Who should be members of COMMB?
So our membership base is comprised of three different categories I would classify. The first category being publishers or media owners. So these are the companies that own the actual billboard. So like the Outfronts, the Astral, the Pattison, the UB Medias of the world. They're the actual out-of-home companies that own the assets. And then the second category would be agencies or advertisers. You could be a large agency, an independent agency, or part of one of the global holding companies like a WPP, IPG Media Brands, or a brand direct like a Subway FCT, et cetera. And then the third category we classify as programmatic remarketers or tech stack. So in our world, there's an automated delivery of advertising campaigns for digital out of home that is called programmatic. And the largest tech companies who operate those would also classify as members under those categories.
Do you find that what's underutilized now with this media? Because I know a lot of people, people are, big in digital, right?
Yep.
In general, but they may not have this as part of their arsenal. So what do you find brands should be thinking about as far as marketing using the out of home?
I think when I do get asked this question quite frequently, and typically I go back to a couple of core fundamentals. So the perception of out of home is that it is a legacy medium, but it's very trusted. It's one of the most trusted mediums in the advertising sort of arsenal of various different product types that a publisher or a buyer or a brand could leverage. One of the interesting components and one of the areas that has great opportunity within the out-of-home space is the onset of digital out-of-home and the use of data across both like traditional, which would be classic static billboards that aren't, it's 100% share of voice, one brand on there, one advertiser. Data is leveraged both within classic as well as in digital out-of-home, obviously a little more enhanced within the digital out-of-home ecosystem. When I talk about digital out-of-home and the leveraging of data and analytics within that, if you think about a digital billboard, it's basically a big computer, whether it be on the side of a road or in some sort of building and venue. So it has all of the same capabilities that your online advertisements have. And one of the great areas of opportunity is from an attribution, a targeting, demographic, lifestyle, psychographic component. We have all of the same capabilities that the online space has. It's just not as widely known that we have that information available. And so that's one of our core sort of mandates from a marketing perspective, is to really educate on how much information is being leveraged and how much data and data science, frankly, is being leveraged within the out-of-home space that is very similar to the online space, but in a much more privacy compliant perspective. In online, you're a one-to-one medium. So of course, the cookieless world that we're about to embark upon in the next couple of years, all of the privacy compliance with, the legislation coming into effect, GDPR, CCPA, Bill C-11, I can go on for days about all of the legislations. We, of course, are privacy compliant, but we're a one-to-many media format, which means that inherently it's more compliant first and foremost, but also you garner larger reach, but within a targeted capacity. So you can still have a campaign at scale where you're looking to, do a mass brand awareness campaign, but you can also have a niche campaign where you're really looking for a very specific target audience, like new Canadian newcomers from a banking perspective or whatnot. So I would say that that's a huge area of opportunity that is somewhat underutilized.
We'll talk a little bit about that, but I think, you have some things right now. By the time people listen to this, it's probably out already, but some things on the horizon. Talk about the new data science that you're launching, or if you're listening in the future, it's launched.
Depending on the time of day that they're listening, the time of year. So in early 2024, we are launching a new platform. We're calling it a production and planning platform called Roadmap. And Roadmap is a very sophisticated tool that runs all of the inventory management side of the media owner's business. So it's about 70,000 assets across the country that sit within our database that we need to manage, both from a product perspective. So if it's digital, the structure of the digital has a loop. So, your rotation of advertisers, it might be a 1-minute loop with, 6-10-second spots, or it could be a different infrastructure. So each media owner has their own structure that complies with the regional legislation of, the minimum amount of time a spot could be played. So our system houses all of that information from a production side of things. And then we also pass along on a planning tool, a front-end planning tool with a very robust UX UI, our core data. So when you reference sort of the new methodology and the product, we're sort of phasing this out. In January of 2024, we launched the product with the production side of things and a light version of the planning tool. And then in July, we launched the full robust version of our planning tool, which is an ingestion of over 8 million different road segments of data right across Canada. So every single roadway, whether it's a side street, an on-ramp, an off-ramp, we have information that is comprised on an hourly basis that gets ingested into our backend infrastructure and is leveraged for campaign planning. So you can choose a demographic, you can choose a target audience, you can choose a campaign flighting period, and our system will present a recommendation on how to achieve something, whether it's a reach and frequency, whether it's just a total impressions on a campaign, that type of thing. So lots on underway, lots coming. It's been a labor of love over the past 3 years, building this product as well as the data science behind it.
Yeah, it sounds like a beast, actually. So let me see if I have it straight. If you publishers, right, would use your platform and be able to serve up like whatever, certain number of ads, certain number of time frames throughout the whole day. And then that they can also, there's data that's being collected so that their companies can target different times of day or different, audiences or things like that. Is that accurate?
Generally speaking, so you're not executing the campaign through Roadmap, our platform. You're doing the preliminary planning, and then you're taking that and communicating directly with the publisher. So if you're a buyer, you're using our tool to plan the campaign because it has every single out-of-home asset within the country basically in our system. And so it's sort of like a one-stop shop where you can actually go in, see everybody's inventory, see what audience and what target you're looking to achieve and what KPIs, and then take that plan away and you'll go direct to the publisher to execute that plan.
I have a technical question. I'm not sure how deep we need to get into it, but I'll let you decide. I have heard with, you're collecting the data and you can retarget, you'll go offline to online where you can retarget mobily from some of the data that's collected. Is that true? And if so, how does that even work? It seems
it is true. So I'll just clarify. It's not a service that COMMB provides, but I can speak to how technically it's executed.
Right.
So what happens when you're looking to do an offline to an online sort of conversion or retargeting? We call it an omni-channel approach. So in the offline space, our data, first and foremost, we leverage multiple different data sets. As I mentioned, we've got this 8 million road segment data. We also leverage a data set called SDK, Software Development Kit. It's a mobile location data source. And that data is leveraged in the same way as these omni-channel campaigns. So what happens is the end user, whether it's the buyer or the publisher, whomever is offering this service up, this omni-channel campaign up, will observe mobile devices that pass by the out-of-home asset. And those devices have various different data pings for their location data. Those are date and time stamped. So you know exactly sort of what day and what time that device was in front of billboard A, for example. And then there is something called an IDFA, which is an identifier for Apple or Android ID for Android phones. That's the advertising ID. And that's where when you get the pop-ups, if you download an app on your phone, it says, do you want to share your location? If you share your location via that, it also goes with that advertising ID. And that ID gets passed back to the online space, knowing that at a specific date and time, it was exposed to an offline out-of-home advertisement. That device then gets retargeted by the same brand in the online space, whether it be your mobile online, your social search, your interstitials, your general content. It all gets served up sort of programmatically. So the ID gets inserted into your trading desk, and then the ads sort of just go out based on an impression delivery.
So companies should be salivating over stuff like this.
Seriously, it's so cool.
And I should be concerned as a cell phone user that Big Brother and Big Sister basically is tracking me wherever I go.
We don't know that it's you, though. We just know that your device 1,
Right.
2, 3, 4, and you happen to see an Adidas ad on the highway.
Yeah.
And
But
then-
yeah, I just want to demystify. I mean, that's how, when we talk about demographic data, that's part of how it's being collected, right? Because it's kind of that, you said like SDK tracking, and it's like, it just knows a cell phone of this, it's an iPhone, it's an Android, are passing by, and that's how it's kind of one of the ways it's collecting data.
More specifically, how we leverage that data in the out-of-home space for digital out-of-home specifically, because we can serve up, dynamic content in digital out-of-home. We would observe the devices that pass by a digital out-of-home space. So we know the date and timestamp that they've passed by, but then we further observe the device to its what's classified as a home origin, which is the device's persistently static location during a period of time, during like 6 months, 12 months. And then from that, we get along in that, we can reverse geocode that into a postal code and work with Stats Canada on all of the public census data. And that helps us get the demo and the lifestyle stuff.
I love it. Yeah, I thank you for demystifying that, because I think a lot of people that I see a lot of people when I'm driving. I mean, there's more and more different types of companies. Like I only used to see lawyers, and now there's a lot of different types of companies advertising, and people see it as like this legacy platform, or maybe some people perceive it as that. But you can get very specific, and you can do really sophisticated things with it, from, like you said, move offline to online, move offline to offline, through mail and postal. I mean, even the biggest companies in the world, Google, Amazon, web companies, are using, these methods, right? So
you can get super creative with it too. So there's tech. We can ingest like a JSON feed or an RSS feed, XML data feeds into the backend ad servers, and trigger dynamic content. So for example, if there's a sports game on, you can trigger the score in sort of on-demand real time. As a brand, you can literally put a section on your creative that has a feed of some sort of dynamic content. It could be the weather. It could be, it's raining outside, so play an umbrella ad. We've had paint companies that have matched the creative to the color of the sky in the background. You can get very creative with this using technology, which is really cool.
We'll talk about how you got into this, and I'll venture to say early in your career, you never thought you would ever be in this industry. But let's go in reverse for a second. You were tapped on the shoulder, and people wanted you to come in to COMMB to help.
Yes.
And talk about how I'll use the term modernized COMMB, because in general, it's a legacy media, even though people may not realize all the capabilities. But how did you go in when you basically came in leadership? What did you do?
It's a great question. It's definitely, COMMB has been around for, 50 plus years, far longer than I've been on this earth, let's say. And so when I was approached to come in, I honestly turned it down at first, because I'm very much an entrepreneur. I like to move quickly, very agile. I can work well with, small amounts of money to be able to achieve great things. And so I wasn't really comfortable at the time with, whether COMMB and the board would be supportive of that. And to my delight and surprise, they were incredibly supportive and encouraging on the very different approach that we took, both internally as a culture. So when I joined, there was 6 employees, including myself. And now we're up to almost 18 full-time employees and probably 30 plus in contractors and partners. So, that's in itself a big task to be able to bring in the right team to foster the right culture. And to me, the team is everything. So in order for us to modernize, we needed to ensure that we had a diverse team that represented various different backgrounds, various different cultural diversity, but as well as experience. And so bringing in the right team certainly was one of the largest, and then really focusing on content and our outwardly facing PR was a large thing. So thought leadership is very important to me, which is one of the large components that I brought to COMMB, which was the ability to speak about the industry holistically, not just in the Canadian marketplace, but on a global scale, to be able to travel, internationally and speak as a keynote at conferences and whatnot. It garners a lot of attention on what we're doing, while simultaneously we embarked upon completely revamping the approach to the methodologies and the reporting and the data that was being output as a member, which is really the core reason you become a member. You want access to the data, to the tools, to the insights to validate that, yes, okay, as a buyer, the impression data that I'm getting from a seller is COMMB certified, it's COMMB audited. So it was sort of a combination of both having to, first and foremost, build the culture, build the team, and then at the same time, focus on modernizing the actual output of what we were providing from a product and a service perspective. And then ensuring that while we were doing that, we were educating the marketplace on those components. So I think that would be how, I guess, we modernized.
Talk about culture for a second. And we'll get into, you started and sold 2 previous companies in the space, but what do you do with, either COMMB or previous companies to foster good culture? Right now, anyone listening is probably CEO, entrepreneur, or in leadership. And what else should they be thinking about to foster good culture?
For me, it's always encouraging my team to take risks, to be curious, and to consistently learn. We learn by making mistakes. And as a leader, we have to recognize and realize that our team will make mistakes. And it's our job to help them learn from those mistakes. Also, I'm not a top-down leader. I'm very much, I'll get in there, I'll get my hands dirty. I will work with the team. So for me to foster an appropriate culture, I have to know everything about what the team is doing, in the sense of I need to know a little bit about data science and be able to speak eloquently about how we're actually executing this. I'm not the one building the algorithms, but I know exactly how it's being done. And that builds respect from the technical teams, from the actual data scientists. From a marketing perspective, I need to understand and be able to inspire my marketing team by the things that I'm doing, whether it be, speaking or helping them get front and center on stage. So it's not always just about one face being up there from a marketing perspective. It's encouraging other people to get out there and to speak and to grow their personal brands, to grow, their curiosity. So my perspective is very collaborative. It's very much I'm part of the team. I might have a title, and sure, I have various other duties that come with that. But at the end of the day, we're all a team. And if somebody needs help, they know they can pick up the phone at 2, 3 in the morning and call me, and I'll answer. So it's more just, it's very familial for me.
And then how do you manage the kind of the remote culture?
We're about 95% remote. So we go into the office just to collaborate sometimes. There's a core group of us who live relatively close to the office. So we'll work on Slack and we'll be like, hey, I'm going to pop over to the office today. It's literally across the street from my condo, coincidentally. But, we have a very open, communicative environment. So Slack is our main communication tool. And I can tell you that we are on Slack 24/7. It's a great product, great tool. And interestingly, when I came into the organization, there was no communication tools. People were using WhatsApp groups, and I was like, "How do you function? Like, how do you get work done? We need a tool now." So Slack, within my second week, was the first tool I implemented. But yeah, we're predominantly remote. We are moving our office. We're downsizing our office. We have a very large, like 4,000 square foot office that isn't really being used. So we're downsizing to a brick and beam space, which will also be next year around March. We move into that space. So we get together. We do social events. We'll have team lunches, but for the most part, we're just always talking to one another, whether it be on Slack or whether somebody's texting another person, doing little huddles via Slack or, Zoom. It's just communication, frankly. And I think when you build a culture that is very collaborative, the communication just happens organically.
Let's talk about the two companies. So you created and sold two companies in the space. Talk about the first one and what it did.
Yeah, I was the first one. I was more a part of that company. It wasn't my company solely. Mm-hmm. And so that came to fruition. There was a company called Titan Outdoor. It was a multinational company, had offices and assets in the UK, the US, and in Canada. Prior to my joining Titan, they sold the UK assets. And then about 6-7 months into my time with Titan Outdoor, they decided to sell off their Canadian assets. And so that became an opportunity for some of us to put in, some equity. It was largely owned by a private equity firm called Clairvest. They had already shared, but then a few of us came in because we wanted to, venture into that space and have some ownership. And we've already part of the situation. At the time, I ran all of the marketing and IT. So the infrastructure, and my role within the startup company, which is called Seasock Media, was basically just that. So I had to break all of the IT infrastructure off of the parent company and recreate it here as a standalone entity. So I created all of the end IT infrastructure, built their ERP, their CRM, their financial platform. And I also was head of marketing. So I actually designed the logo myself and built the growth marketing and go-to-market strategies and plans. And then finally was able to sort of build up a team. For a very long time during that transition, I was working, 24 out of 24 hours a day. And it was fun. We built a first market offering. This is back in like 2012 to 2014, 15-ish. We built the first offering of mobile retargeting within the Canadian space based on exposure to out-of-home assets. So at the time, we had all of the assets at Yonge Dundas Square, which is like New York's Times Square. And we would geofence those assets and then retarget them via mobile, which was like hugely innovative back at that time. And so it caught the eye of Bell Media, and we were acquired by Bell Media for a high amount of money, and 125 million approximately. And then I went to another startup company called Dynamic Outdoor, which was predominantly owned by a company called All Vision. And All Vision is one of our members now at COMMB. So kind of full circle with the teams. I know a lot of the people from past experiences, which is great. But it was sort of the same thing, like, with the difference that Dynamic Outdoor was pure play digital out of home. So we were heavily focused on technology and innovation. We were one of the first companies to integrate programmatic digital out of home back in 2015 to 2017 in the Canadian space. We were a very early adopter. And interestingly enough, I actually at the time built a product called an audience intelligence platform that was competitive to what COMMB was offering at the time, because I at the time COMMB wasn't providing a lot of focus on digital. So, back then I decided to build it myself, and that caught the attention of Outfront Media. So we were acquired by Outfront Media, and I stayed at Outfront for about 18 months as their youngest executive. I think I was 33, 34, something like that. But yeah, that's
amazing journey. I know a big influence for you in your career has been Michelle. Can you talk about Michelle a little bit and maybe some of the lessons or advice she's given you?
Yes. So Michelle Erskine, she's the CEO of Outfront Canada, and also the chair of the board of directors at COMMB. We've known each other for many years. So she kind of mentored me throughout my career, and was always very supportive and inspirational, particularly as a woman in a senior level executive role in a very male dominated industry. It's hard to find that mentorship and the guidance on how to navigate some of these situations. So she's always been very influential, very inspiring. She gives me great advice, whether it be personally or professionally. And she's a great mentor.
Do you remember any specific advice or maybe story that she told you that helped in any in a situation that you had to deal with?
I would say to never take it personal. Was some really great advice. And I'm not somebody that is easily offended by any means. So, that was just like further confidence to ensure that my sort of non-biased approach to things, or, when people are in a heated moment, or if you're, in a discussion, a negotiation, it's really nothing personal. Like, you can have a debate, but at the end of the day, you can still walk out and go have a coffee. So I think that was great advice.
Yeah, one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but that's one of the four agreements, which is don't take anything personally. And it's much. I think about the four agreements every day, and it's hard to do that for me, at least, because someone's talking directly to me, so how am I not supposed to take it personally? But I even think about on the road, someone like cuts me off. I'm like, okay, they're probably having a bad day, not taking it, but it's sometimes hard to do in the moment. So I love that advice.
Yeah, it was great advice.
And then another, I don't know if you call mentor or influence is Rena.
Yes, Rena Clydesdale. She's head of Kinetic, president of Kinetic Outdoor, which is one of the largest buying agencies in the out-of-home space. And she's been in the industry for a very long time, and always admired how she carries herself with such grace and kindness. She recently won an award at one of the Ad Club Out of Home Day, the Merit Award, which is like the highest prestige for somebody within our industry to win. And it was really humbling to see. I got to introduce her a bit on stage, which was nice. She's a great friend. Once again, also a great mentor. Known her for years, and I think she had similar advice. Never take it personal, but also always be curious. And I think that's one of the components that I strive to do. I'm constantly learning new things. I'll take a risk just for the sake of curiosity. And I think when you take big risks, you have large rewards typically. And of course, you're going to fail, but at times, but you'll learn a lot from that. So she's been a great mentor and friend as well.
So we're kind of, Amanda, kind of going in reverse order a little bit. But, from COMMB to, the sale of two companies to, I want to go back to the beginning, which is when you first discovered the power of out of home, specifically billboards. Take me back to that for a second.
The fun story. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
So I was in fashion for 15 years. I was a fashion model. I was scouted when I was 14 by Elite, and then I was subsequently signed with IMG worldwide. So I got to do a lot of traveling. from a fashion perspective and as a model. And so I first discovered out of home and billboards when I was on my first billboard as a model at Yonge Dundas Square. And it was a campaign for a company called Jean Machine, which was a denim retailer in Canada. And I remember I had this bench zip up jacket on, and it was like the back of me with my head kind of like tilted. And then I had these like shorts on that were bright pink. And the funny part about this story is that they put a 3D extension on the actual billboard, which was to captivate the consumer's eye. And I never even knew what this was until I ended up actually in the out-of-home space. But I go down to Yonge Dundas Square with my old school SLR camera, and I'm wanting to take photos of this billboard. And then I realized that there was a skirt affixed to the billboard. And so it was an actual piece of fabric that they had attached to the billboard. So when the wind blew, it blew the skirt up, and you could see like these bright pink, booty shorts. And so it was the first time where I was like, wow, this is actually really creative and very captivating. And then from that day on, I kind of started noticing out of home pretty regularly, but I didn't think I would end up in this space. It was honestly it was over 10 years, after that I ended up embarking on an out of home career.
But, even back then you were entrepreneurial and you started helping models. Talk about some of the things you were doing with that.
Yeah. So I when I was 21, I opened a model placement agency, which I would scout young new models, and I would help train them and place them with the right agencies. Because, in the fashion industry, there's a lot of agencies that claim to be legitimate, and they basically just take money from, young aspiring talent that don't know any better. So I would educate them and help place them with legit agencies. And then when I was 23, I opened a second agency that was an artist representation agency. So I represented photographers, videographers, DOPs, director of photography, filmmakers all around the world. So that both were sort of on a global scale. I would place models internationally, nationally. And the photographers I repped were, Shanghai, LA, Milan, Paris, Madrid, New York, all of the major sort of fashion markets. We had photographers, and my role there was to ensure that their deals were negotiated correctly. So we would work with, the Condé Nast brands, or the Penske Media brands and titles, all of the big publications, to ensure that, their work was being published or featured, independent magazines, international magazines, et cetera.
So I mentioned the front of the interview, things took a crazy turn. Crazy is even an understatement. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about what happened.
Yes. When I was 27, I was on set at a photo shoot modeling, and I had wrapped I had two shoots back to back that day. So I'd wrapped the first one, and we were just, finishing things up. The hairstylist had put this like purple stuff in my hair. So, I was at the sink, and he was washing it out. And I started to get this like insane headache, absolutely insane. I've never felt this pain before. And then the talent from the next shoot calls me on my cell phone, and I'm like, kind of in and out because I'm in so much pain. I didn't really realize what was going on at this time, or at this moment anyways. And I hang up on my hairstylist for the next shoot. And I was like, I'm in so much pain right now. I'm just like holding my head. I walk out outside of the studio. I go to a window because these photo studios are notorious for not having, proper air circulation or fresh air. So there was an open window. This was June 17th of 2009. And my makeup artist on set that day followed me out and started asking me questions. She was like, what type of pain is it? Is it throbbing? Is it stabbing? And I was like, I don't know. It's just the most pain I've ever felt. And then the next thing I know, I am on the floor. I think I had fell. And I try to like pick up my phone, and I'm like lost mobility in my right side. And I blacked out. Last thing I remember was call my emergency contact. So I had a hemorrhagic stroke caused by two areas of bleed. So two aneurysms that had burst simultaneously, caused by something very rare called arteriovenous malformation or brain AVM. So in
was that genetic then?
It's actually so rare that doctors don't really know how it occurs, but it is, from what they know, it's not genetic, but it does happen while you're a fetus.
And for people like, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the brain, this arterial system is basically right below the brain. Is that right? So like if it bursts, it's basically essentially on the brain.
It's within the brain. So there's a spectrum. There's a grade, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a grade from 1 to 5 of how deep these bleeds can occur. 1 being more dermal, like surface level, and 5 being the most like inner areas of your brain. So my 2 areas happen in my occipital lobe. So left side, you can see I have this beautiful scar. Left side, 2 areas of bleeding, grades 3 and 4. So it was very deep within my brain, the 2. So I was rushed to St. Michael's. Fortunately, I was in Toronto, close to home at the time. And surgeons did a very quick procedure to cauterize the areas of bleeding to stop the bleeding. But because there was actually 2 different areas, multiple areas, I had so much damage to my brain that I could not withstand an actual craniotomy. So I needed to have a full craniotomy, which is full brain surgery, where they cut into they take a piece of your skull out and remove the damaged veins and vessels. So I was temporarily paralyzed on my right side, just due to the damage of the brain. I was blind about 85%. And I was in ICU for 3-4 weeks, just waiting. And then they sent me home under 24-hour care as I started to regain a little bit of mobility. So the mobility regain as the bruising and scabbing had and some of the swelling had subsided from the hemorrhagic stroke and the areas of bleeding. So they sent me home under 24-hour care. And I was finally able to withstand, or healthy enough to withstand, a full craniotomy surgery, September 24th of 2009. So I had to wait from June until the end of September. So of course, during this time and during the couple of years of recovery, I closed my agencies, my businesses, and took a pivot in my career.
When you woke up, right, because that stuff happens in an instant, you're waking up in the hospital, with tubes everywhere.
Literally everywhere.
What are you thinking?
To be honest, I was a little confused. I didn't really know what was going on. I remember I woke up in a panic and I tried to get out of the bed. Like I literally tried to stand up and I couldn't. And I was kind of like flailing around. And I remember that the nurses, like I could hear them, but I wasn't really cognizant enough to understand exactly what was going on. I could hear them saying like, we should probably put her in straps so that she doesn't try to get up. It's like she doesn't know what's going on. Unfortunately, they didn't. They just gave me a bunch more medicine and I fell back asleep. But when I was able to sort of come to, it wasn't until it was like 3 weeks basically before I even knew that I had to have a full craniotomy surgery. I was just like in and out of this like medically induced sleep, let's say. And that was to try to ensure that, what trauma my brain had been through could heal to its best. When I was able to actually like wake up, I did remember I had full recollection of sort of everything up to, the blackout before I was in the hospital. So that was a good thing because I had that cognitive memory. When I would speak to the surgeons, when they came into my room to tell me that I needed a full craniotomy, they explained what that was. I didn't know what it was at the time. They had suggested they'd explored a few different options because there's some sort of chemo-like treatments that could be done. There's really 3 treatments for this. If you have a bleed, and it's very, very rare in the sense of survival if you have a bleed first and foremost, and then being like a fully functional cognitive human post that.
Were they surprised you even survived what you survived? That point?
Yeah, I had like a 0.01% of being a functional person. And I remember going into the surgery laying on the operating table, and the anesthetician leaned over me. He's like, okay, I'm going to put the mask on and count you down to sleep. I could hear the doctors speaking, and they flew in a surgeon, because my case was so rare. They flew in a surgeon from the States and another one from Germany, who specialized in this particular scenario. And I could hear them talking about the projected blood loss. And I just remember, I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but I remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, that sounds like a whole lot of blood. And then I just passed out from the anesthetic. But when I woke up from surgery, I remembered everything like up until that moment, which once again is really remarkable. Very much, I'm very blessed to be here. And a bleed from a brain AVM specifically typically occurs either as a young child or in elderly individuals. So for me to have this happen at 27 was really, really quite rare.
What was your physical state like after the second major surgery?
It was challenging. I was probably 90, I'm 5'9". So for me to be, 95 pounds, I had lost a significant amount of weight. You're in the hospital, you're eating barely anything, or you're just getting pumped through with IV. I had to do physio. So I had a physiotherapist who would come visit me every day to get me up to walk. And it was like the slowest walk ever, but I was moving, and that's really all.
The first time around, you were paralyzed all on one side. And this time, had you regained some of the sensation?
So I regained movement before the surgery, before the major craniotomy. The temporary paralysis was maybe about 10, 15 days. And it was just because of how much damage and pressure was on my brain from the bleed and from the bruising and scabbing. So that subsided and I was able to move. But because I was so weak and I had lost so much muscle mass and weight from being basically bedridden from June until the end of September, and physically and cognitively, you still have to sort of work through, building that body-brain connection again. It took quite a bit of time. My full recovery was about 2 years. I had a seizure disorder, a very bad one. After that, for about 12 to 14 months, I was on some really intense medication that had like the craziest side effects of like overgrowth of gums and disfigurement of your jaw. And as a fashion model at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? The face.
It's like the least of your worries, but it's probably a worry nonetheless.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a lengthy recovery, and I'm just grateful to be here.
How do you think about that now, on a daily basis?
I have this beautiful horseshoe. It's a massive scar, massive horseshoe that I wear very proudly. And it was a 12.5-hour surgery. So I think that if I can withstand what I went through there, there's nothing, there's nothing that's going to really bother me at this point. Like I'm very calm. I really don't react. I don't get into like arguments or fights. I'll say a piece if I need to say a piece, but I'm really grateful. And at the end of the day, like, I'm humbled to be here. So for me, kindness and grace is everything. And I think that gratitude, like, for everyone's various different walks, people would look at me and you've got this career and this job and this CEO title of whatever. But if you don't actually know the journey that someone went through to get there, and you don't know who they are, don't ever judge someone. Don't judge a book by the cover, I guess, is like the most stereotypical statement, but it's really, really true. So it's humbled me.
Yeah.
Great.
No, thanks for sharing that. It's humbling to listen to, so I appreciate you sharing it. And I just want a couple of last things, Amanda, and just thanks for sharing your journey, your stories. Obviously, we talked about COMMB here, and we're looking at the screen. But I know there's several other organizations that you're involved with. One of them being billboard.ca. You can see it's ca.billboard.com. Talk about this for a second.
Certainly. So my business partners and I own Billboard magazine in the Canadian market. We launched October 5th, which was very exciting. It took about 18 months for us to negotiate the deal with Penske. But our mission and our ethos with Billboard Canada is to highlight Canadian talent on more of a global scale. So we launched with our inaugural cover, as I said, October 5th. And we did that with 5 Punjabi artists. So all Canadian Punjabi artists that are getting major international waves, global waves. And we're very excited to be able to provide a platform and a voice for Canadian arts, culture, and talent. So we're very excited.
So this is with COMMB, you're in the actual physical billboard space, but Billboard CA is actually the music billboard space, not to be confused. And then you're also involved in, as you can see on the screen, Arts Help. Talk about Arts Help.
Yes, so Arts Help is the largest global digital arts publication focused on conscious creation, if you will. So we've got a number of different consumer-facing products and services and a number of different B2B products. But we are an editorial platform, so a content platform that provides a voice for independent and unknown artists globally. We have sent art to space. We've won a Guinness Book of World Records for the largest amount of art being created on a Zoom call during the pandemic. And we also give funding to artists. So we have a large partnership with the United Nations. Everything that we do is very cause-oriented, focused on sustainability, and all of the impacts of human footprint on the environment. So we give funding to artists. If you're interested, please check out the website.
Amanda, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone can check out COMMB, COMMB.ca. You can check out Billboard.ca. You can check out Arts Help and much more, and more episodes of the podcast. And Amanda, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.